feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank. Hey
everyone, I'm Mark Scribner, your host of The Shrimp Tank with my co-host Micah Keel today. We have an extremely exciting guest today. His name is Cody Barbo from Wills and Trust. And obviously we're not going to have somebody on our show that's not interesting. But what's really cool about Cody and his company that we're going to really get very deeply into is the space that they're in. It's a probably over 200 plus year industry that has had no change really in a long time. And their business process and what they've been able to do and disrupt an industry that hasn't been changed for a long time is really, really exciting. I'd like to remind all our listeners that you can find our show, all past shows on the shrimptank.com/Boston. You can also find this show as well as all our 13 cities past episodes on the shrimptank.com. You can download on iHeart, Google, Stitch, SoundCloud, basically anywhere that you can download your podcast, you'll be able to find this show. So with that in mind, I would really like to welcome Cody Barbo from Wills and Trust. I was connected with him via a mutual friend and data-driven, but I think we're going to get some really great information about a company that's growing extremely fast, has unbelievable press all across the country, has inked some deals with some of the biggest financial institutions that you all would be aware of. We won't mention who they are. But the trajectory and growth of Wills and Trust is an amazing, and I'm very interested in the service, and I'm really excited to have you here today, Cody.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So what I'd like to start with first, as I alluded to when we did our opening, is Wills, for the most part, and Trust. I mean, I did some quick research this morning, and the quickest I could find on Wikipedia is the first will was probably in paper form went back to 1893. So something like 183 years old.
Yeah.
This concept has been out there, but there really hasn't been much change. And you know, Micah and I are both in the financial services world, and we obviously talk about this subject a lot. And for most people, it typically is like going to get a root canal. Like they hate the process. And when I'm looking at some of the reviews that your company has, one of the commonalities that I see that I'd really love to learn more about is everybody says ease of use, easy, best process that's they've ever gone through. And I'd like to maybe just take a start of like how you decided to come into this industry that hasn't been really evolved in a long period of time. And then, you know, kind of coming with this business philosophy in this space and where that came from.
Yeah, so it's an honor to be here, and thanks to all the listeners for letting me educate y'all on some estate planning. Probably not the topic you're thinking of listening into today. So I've been an entrepreneur for almost a decade now. I'm based in Southern California, down in San Diego, and this idea for Trust Molds really wasn't at the top of my plate when I was in transition from my last venture-backed company. What was on my plate is I was about to get married, and my wife and I had one of those less fun dinner conversations talking about working with an advisor, setting up life insurance, and setting up a will seemed like the adult responsible thing to do. So it led me down this kind of path of, well, most people do this with attorneys, right? So I should probably start calling around. And the thing that blew me away was just one, the variable cost. Why was I getting quotes from $3,000 to $5,000? Why was this process going to take 3 weeks to 3 months? And why did I have to do it offline? For almost a decade, I've filed my taxes with Turbotax with no issues and with some complexity in the mix. I've managed my entire financial and investment portfolio online. I even set up my $1 million term life policy online with one of these new insurtechs. And I'm almost pre-wired. I'm a millennial, but I'm an older millennial. I'm in my 30s now. I'm married. I have a daughter. But even at the time in my late 20s, I was like, to go do this offline just seemed ridiculous. When there's been so much innovation across finances, insurance, and even tax tech, why not estate planning? So the obvious is look at all the other online alternatives. So LegalZoom will come up and we can unpack that further, but really didn't appeal to me to go to LegalZoom. The reviews weren't that straightforward and stellar. They're not an estate planning company. They've been around for 21 years and they primarily serve small business owners. So when we thought about what does a modern best-in-class estate planning experience look like, we knew that we would have to lead with a great brand that would roll off the tongue, trust and will. Our website's trustmold.com. We'd have to lead with customer success, meaning that people don't really know a lot about estate planning. So education's a barrier. Two, trust. Trust is a huge barrier. It helps, it's in our name, but do you trust an attorney? Do you trust to do this online? And then the third, by being a digital first brand, we can help fight the biggest battle, which is procrastination. You're not required to have an estate plan. So how do we continue to market to the everyday family, but also to ping them and notify them, not just that, hey, you've created your estate plan, but as life changes, your family changes, your wealth status changes, you move states, there's all these updates that take place that should justify an up-to-date estate plan. And our biggest concern is that people that think that they're good because they have an estate plan, but they haven't touched it in 5, 10, 15 years, it could also be invalidated. They end up in probate, which is the whole point they're trying to avoid to begin with. So we wanted to build a product and experience that's inclusive for all, to serve the newest and youngest families to people that are fairly high net worth. And we've been on an incredible journey the last 3 years, which I'm excited to share with you guys more in the minutes to come.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it is amazing. You found a niche, really. Ultimately, it seems like more and more people, when I talk to them and ask them that simple question, do you have a will in place? Do you have a trust? That it seems to be no, I don't, or oh, I haven't looked at that in years. So I love that you're taking this very important tool and something that everyone should have in place, and you're making it easy for consumers to access and utilize. Can we talk a little bit about, because we're all familiar with LegalZoom. They do a great job of marketing, but that is a good point. It seems like LegalZoom is more along the lines of small business owners, but I've heard that you could get a will and trust. So what would be the difference between using the online services with a company like LegalZoom and then going through trust and will?
Yeah, so let's take even one step back. Estate planning is state specific. So the documents that you're receiving, whether you go to an attorney and spend thousands of dollars, whether you go to LegalZoom, or even if you come to TrustMe, there is some state specificity that's required where we have to stay black and white. And if you don't have a lot of complexity, it's almost crazy to think that you're paying a difference of 3,000 to 5,000 versus 300 to 500 for effectively the same set of documents if you don't have right complexity in wealth and family, and there's tax implications. So most people that are getting exposed to TrustMe, they're not thinking attorney, they're not thinking LegalZoom. Our first impression of TrustMe is usually that customer's first impression of estate planning. So we really get to set expectations with them. That's why we lead with education. We lead with a product that you can go through from start to finish without payment. You don't have to pay until the very end. We lead with customer success, meaning you can do live chat with our team 7 days per week. You can book a phone call. In some states, we're even offering attorney support as a premium addition for those that want not just additional peace of mind, but actually do have some wealth planning or scenario modeling or tax implications that they want to talk through with a professional, even though they can stay within our ecosystem. And it's this effort combined. It's easy to use, it's inclusive, you get from start to finish, and you don't have to pay until the end. If you go look at our reviews, which you mentioned earlier, there's a reason why we have the best reviews in the industry today, even though we're only 3 years old. Whereas with LegalZoom, 21-year operating history, their estate planning product has kind of been neglected. It feels dated. You have to pay up front. There's all these other bells and whistles. You start clicking on a couple boxes and you go from what is seemingly at the surface level a competitively priced product to TrustMe that you're end up paying 2 to 3 times as much before you even get started. Like, that's crazy. Why it's not like you're paying for the car before you test drive it. So we really take a lot of pride in our reviews, our ease of use of our product, and our customer success. It's almost the opposite of LegalZoom's estate planning experience. I don't want to discredit the size and scale of that company. They've been around for 21 years for a reason, but they're trying to get small business owners to set up their LLC, do trademark and copyrights, employment agreements. I wouldn't be surprised if they sunset their estate planning offering as we continue to go down this path, or partner with us in some way or fashion, because they're still the 800-pound gorilla in legal tech, but there's no category-leading estate planning company, especially with the tech-driven experience. So I'd say that's the biggest difference between us at the end of the day.
Yeah, and just to maybe to work on that point, I mean, my experience with the cost disparities, like being in a bigger city and then you go out to the suburbs, like the difference in price is justified by the rent typically, or the cachet of the name. But most experiences that I've ever had is a lot of the attorneys don't even draft the documents. They're pulling from some kind of Staples kind of software or something, and they're not really, I mean, I won't disparage because we work with a lot of really nice attorneys and all, but oftentimes you don't see the consistency there. There's really no rhyme or reason for the pricing. I wanted to maybe kind of dig into with your experience and having multiple companies that have launched and sold and all that. When you started this particular company and trying to figure out the niche and the space and all that, Was that data driven? Like, I know we have a mutual friend that, you know, they really look at a lot of consumer data and they see, you know, everything that comes from the internet, and then, you know, what the kind of the hot points are. But when you actually kind of went pen to paper with this and said, all right, like you alluded to, you had, you know, an experience. But where do you go from there when you're actually getting this company off the ground? Is it all like basically doing research, or just trying to get, you know, APIs and things like that in place?
Yeah, so the honest answer is today we're very data driven. In the early days, we weren't so much. I think that I think it's Paul Graham's famous quote is do things that don't scale for startups in the early days. And one of those things was because the co-founders and I all same life stage. In fact, our team of 24, almost all of us are within like 25 to 38 years old. Most of us are married. A third of us have kids. We really just went to our networks. I have a huge alumni network at San Diego State University where I'm on the alumni board. I've been very active for the last decade. And then my co-founder, Daniel, he went to school in Baylor. All his friends that are still in Texas, they're on like kids number 3 or 4, their second home. So it's just a reflection that this elder half of the millennial demographic, which is tens of millions of us now, are majority of the kids born into our demo, a majority of homes purchased are by our demographic. We're in the wealth building phase of our life as much as we are in the kind of, you know, wealth transfer preparation phase that we're dealing with parents or grandparents that are, you know, passing along wealth and assets. So we just went and solicited our network. We launched our Will product in April 2018 when we graduated Techstars. So our first couple hundred members were friends of ours. And, you know, we set expectations. Hey, look, you may not have the perfect experience, so we're going to give it to you for free or at a steep discount. But what we want is for you to give us feedback. Give us feedback on, did we communicate expectations? Did you feel confident as you're going through it? Did you have any drop-off points, like deciding who looks after your kids or deciding, do you want to be buried versus cremated? These are kind of tough and uncomfortable things to talk about. So you try and get people through it without rushing them. And it really started with our network. It then started with kind of our more expanded professional network, starting to ping people on LinkedIn and financial services in the advisor space to folks that work at venture-backed companies or in big corporations that are making good money. But this kind of common theme emerged is that wealth is not the trigger. It's kids is number one. Another big trigger is you're a caregiver. There's 57 million caregivers that are taking care of a loved one. So they need to be able to make medical and financial decisions on that person's behalf. And then another big trigger is the purchase of a home. So it's most families' largest asset they'll ever own. So how do we help educate them on protecting or avoiding that asset ending up in probate? So that's where this jump from a will to a trust comes out. So it took us a year to get the will nationwide. It took us another 6 months to get the trust nationwide. And here we are live now in all 50 states. We've helped 160,000 families with this process with a best-in-class customer experience. It's taken a long time to get here. And now almost across the board, everything's data-driven versus leveraging just the network and our gut.
Now, if someone did have a little more complex scenario, what's the next level that they go to? Is there a way that they could have a personalized, you know, have an attorney kind of help them with a unique scenario if maybe they had a child that needed special needs or something like that?
Yeah, so two-part answer to the question. So there's some cases where TrustMe is not a good fit. If you have very complex family situation or complex needs, or so you're really starting to creep up into that estate tax threshold, 11 and 22 million, which is not most families, honestly, we're not a good fit for you. And that's okay. Like our focus is the 90 to almost 95% of households we are a good fit for. The type of trust that most estate planning attorneys, Mark, that you brought up, they're going to set you up with a revocable living trust. It's great even for people with millions in assets. It's once you start to talk through irrevocable trust, ILITs, GRATs, special needs trust, generational skipping trust, that we start to think from a product roadmap perspective. Yeah, it's probably likely that we'll start to roll those types of trusts out in the next year or two for the obvious reasons that there is a demand for them. We just want to get our core basis of products out today, which is the trust-based estate plan, the will-based estate plan, and then our nomination of guardian form. But Micah, to your point, we do have attorney available in 5 states right now. So our objective is to bring it to all 50 states. So there's a 2-phase rollout. First is bring it to more states. You're paying $200 on top of the purchase price. The attorney's talking you through advanced planning, tax implications, scenario modeling, the funding of the trust, right? After you've created the trust, you got to fund it, retitle assets. And right now it's just a phone call. We're still establishing client attorney privilege between the attorney and that customer. So we don't record those conversations. We're not a part of them. We just own the customer relationship in their documents. The second piece is what I was alluding to, is that the more comprehensive types of trust that we plan on rolling out, probably in the second half of 21 and into 22 and beyond, is more in line with what you would get from your traditional trust and estates attorney experience offline, where you're paying more, to Mark's point, that 5 to 15,000 range for a more complex or comprehensive type of estate plan. And we're just not there yet, and that's okay. So we try and be selective with who we're a good fit for today, but who we can accommodate in the future.
Could we touch on, okay, a family like ours, husband and wife, 3 children, home, some assets. What would our if we wanted to have a trust, what would the cost be for us as a family?
Yeah. So our trust-based estate plan is priced at $499 for couples, and the attorney edition is another $200. The will-based estate plan is $159. I think most consumers know what a will is through family or pop culture. You have big blockbuster hits like Knives Out, where basically threatened to be left out of the will, or you have these will reading, these like, it's like I don't know why I go to pulling out a scroll, but like that's how old estate planning is. And like the future, it's like, hey, pull up your TrustMe account, we'll do the reading and digital distributions through the platform. But we unbundled the estate plan. Most attorneys want you to set up a trust-based estate plan for the obvious reasons. It avoids probate. Yes, it's much more comprehensive, and yeah, they make more money doing it. They're less incentivized to do the will-based estate plan, although that is the familiarity of the everyday consumer today. And we even unbundled the estate plan one step further. We really looked at kids being the inciting incident. And we have a product called Guardian that's priced at $39 and $69 for single or for married couple. It's just a nomination of Guardian form. But like, let's get people in for the emotional kind of peace of mind that if their kids are covered, that yeah, we can continue to build that relationship and educate them to upgrade to the will-based estate plan or upgrade to the trust-based estate plan. But it just takes a lot of the decision-making out, and you can get it done in 5 minutes. So it's kind of like Russian dolls, kind of like reversed it, stepping stones into a more comprehensive estate plan. And that's the beauty of the ongoing relationship we have, is that as family change, as assets change, as life changes, you move states, those updates shouldn't cost an arm and a leg. Most attorneys will charge $1,000. We charge $12 a year.
Right. Oh, that's really, really a nice feature, and it's something so true that we experience on a regular basis in our practice. So, well, that's great.
Yeah. So I'd like to maybe possibly dig into the business. And I would say, again, just going back to your website, it's so intuitive because, and we do it on ours to a certain degree, where we're looking at, how you identify with, solving the problem. And in your case, you'll put something like married without kids. So it's very intuitive in terms of how you're able to start the process, and people can identify with a scenario, and you're doing a lot of the legwork behind the scenes to kind of shape the conversation and point them into the education. But when you started the company, you mentioned a little bit about using beta and stuff like that. But how did you kind of did you compare yourself to like an Amazon model, or, ultimately you had critical traction in the beginning, but like, how did you go about deciding like what this process in the company is going to look like? And in my world, I always kind of use Amazon as an example, just because you're getting, really good communication. It's super easy to use.
Yeah.
And your company is as well, but I'm curious about what the mindset is after you go through that beta, like design this whole thing.
So two-part answer. So the first, and we still use this with our consumers, but we've always pitched ourselves as the TurboTax for estate planning. It's just so easy to digest. They serve 30 million Americans for their annual tax filing needs. And effectively what their software is a giant decision tree. You're just going through and filling out information from the most simple of tax filing to the most complex, which now they offer. I think that for 2 years now, TurboTax Live access to a CPA. It's a peace of mind. Like I used it last year. I had one question for the CPA, and that was it. And just like got what I needed, submitted, filed, got my return, done, easy. And the TurboTax mindset for the consumer will always maintain, because when we think of our top of funnel, to your Amazon example, I almost like look at Uber. Uber didn't pitch the taxi market. Uber pitched all of transportation, whether it's food, people, freight, from bike, car, boat, plane, train, that was their objective, is move every item on earth from point A to point B, whether it's consumer, direct to consumer, or B2B. And they pitched a much larger market. They got the private market valuation, and now they're a public company, despite the pandemic effect on the business. with us, it wasn't just this transaction of creating the estate plan. The second piece was what about the people that have an estate plan that need to update it? So we're not just capturing demand that people get married, buy a home, have kids, but people that are needing to update their documents, or people that never thought they could do this online. They have children, or they have their caregiver. They want to set this up without wealth being the trigger. And it's actually creating a larger market than exists today. And we're carving out market share from existing online players, from the offline attorneys, but also creating a larger market with our brands, our easy to use product, and our inclusive pricing. So the long-term vision for the company isn't, again, just the creation of the estate plan, the updating, it's the management of the estate. That's why we have a product for financial advisors that over 1,000 advisors are using to bring their clients into the ecosystem. Creates this almost like a social network around the estate plan with not just the key service professional, but even the family members themselves, so that eventually, when that time comes and everybody dies, that's just a given. It's morbid, but it's true, that having a foundation for an end-to-end digital transfer of wealth and assets has never existed. That's what we're building towards. We'll eventually have products that serve probate, offer a bridge to fiduciary and trustee services, inheritance loans. The objective is that you never go offline to have to complete, manage, or settle your estate. And that is a vision that no one has pitched for 21 years since first estate plans popped up online, LegalZoom. And it's the most aggressive vision currently of the small landscape of startups that do operate in this space. And with the funding that we've raised to date, we are poised to be the first to do it, but also to do it best in class for families out there.
Yeah, it's just tough. Can I maybe do a follow-up there? So, you started off and just trying to look at the arc of, a business and being an entrepreneur. Like the stuff that you're talking about today, I don't know that you imagined all this in the beginning, because I don't think you solved
no chance.
problems, right?
Yeah.
So, do you build an advisory board, I would assume, and then when you get, some kind of venture money and stuff like that, you're bringing in people to kind of like, look, hey, we could add XYZ, we could add taxes next, for example, we're just using that as an example. But
yeah.
Is it fair to say when you started, you had a good rough idea of what you want it to look like, but then as it starts to evolve, then you're bringing in intellectual capital, outside money and stuff like that, and people are like bringing ideas to you to kind of shape out like the next 3 to 5 year type of thing?
Yeah, so kind of a three-phase answer here. The first is, this is my first rodeo. It's my third time doing this. So I had some insights coming into this, both from a professional lens, but also just the personal lens, like getting married and now as a parent, always look at our business through that lens and the end consumer that we reach. And the same for my co-founders too. Coming from agency background, building software for Fortune 100 companies, many of those were financial service companies. So the lens that a bigger company looks at financial products through, not just a startup. The second piece was we did go out and recruit a small board of advisors. So we had a 20-year trust and estates and business law attorney before we had hired our in-house attorney. That was our first employee. We had an advisor who knows how to market and sell to parents. She runs a very successful marketplace technology platform out of Boulder, Colorado, instrumental. We had a product advisor who was also an angel investor who spent 10 years on the Turbotax team. So super tactical product feedback early on. We had not a financial advisor in the sense that you guys operate, but a CFO that, like, if we want to take this thing far beyond just this documents mindset, how do we really pitch a long-term vision for what is hopefully going to be a one-day public company, not just a company that gets acquired in 2 years, right? So kind of a CFO advisor. And then lastly, a brand advisor. One of the top brand agencies in the country, their CEO is a brand advisor to the company, because we knew how essential brands would be to us. That, like, if we walk down the street, not quite there yet, but probably in a few years, and ask 10 people or 50 people, hey, name an estate planning company. Hopefully TrustMe is that name that comes to mind. The same way that, hey, what's a tax? Where do I file taxes? People say probably TurboTax or maybe H&R Block, and then CPA, tertiary to that. So we then, moving from just our own experience to our small board of advisors, our angel investors, we raised $500,000 as like a pre-seed round from about 24 angel investors, mostly here locally in the San Diego market. Guys that had taken companies public, folks that served as executives at big financial service companies, folks that had a legal background or a financial advising background, and relied on them as much for guidance of where we take the company as much as just being cheerleaders for us. It's really stressful and hard in the early days. That first year in business is so tough, even having done this before. So to have that as a support system, getting this first year of the business off the ground, it allows us to raise what was a $2 million seed round that was announced, and through now a Series B. And it's just, we rely on our network of investors as partners in this journey for us. So super helpful.
Yeah, and let's maybe talk about, Mike, I'm sorry, I just questions, but let's talk about that in terms of, when you're looking for people like seed money and things like that. I heard that it's very important for you, or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but to have people that can not only write the check, but they're bringing something else to the table other than money. Money is very important, but it sounds like you want the input. So, you're looking for true partners in the sense that they're able to bring some extra value. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So the mindset, I've gone the venture route path twice now, and not every company needs to raise venture capital, right? You have to be very thoughtful on why you approach this decision. And for us, it was how do we do more faster? How do we accelerate the business, accelerate our growth and team, and really move what is, potentially a 10 to 20 year journey down to 5 to 7 years to becoming a public company, getting to profitability and impacting millions of customers in a very tight time period. You've seen that with Lemonade Insurance. It's like a really great recent example in the home and renters insurance space, and with a great brand, great team, product, et cetera. So with the investors that we've brought on throughout this journey, even through our most recent round, there's plenty of capital out there. There's plenty of private capital at the angel level, at the institutional level. And one of the things that entrepreneurs forget, I forget this sometimes, is like, we are giving the opportunity to the investors. It's not the other way around. If I don't like an investor, it could be one thing about them, I'm out, move on to the next one. I am a 6'4" white male. I'm not a female founder. I'm not a founder of color. Like, I also forget that there's biases in this process that I'm just completely blind to. And I give a lot of fundraising tips and tactics, but I always try and understand the lens that this founder is looking at it through, because they may be looking at fundraising through a very different lens than I do. But for me, it's always been about values and integrity. And for the cap table that we have, the partners that we have, hopefully I don't annoy them, but like, I'm on a texting basis with all of them. I have a rotating monthly call with all of them, not to just hit on like all the great things that we do. I'm like, hey, let's unpack like some strategic decision-making that we're thinking about. Maybe it's around product or a partnership or a key hire or a tough decision that we have to make. And without it being just a formal board meeting on a quarterly basis. And I love that we have that relationship with our investors. And the fact that I can text my angel investors, even too, folks that work in corporate insurance and finance, and like where we're much deeper into the business and where we take it, I get a much more tactical, specific question more than like the broad strokes that you do in the early days. So we've been really fortunate that everyone that is on the cap table is from a previous relationship. Very few are cold. They were like kind of new introductions as they came through that round. And it's just, we're really grateful for the partners that we have. And everyone brings something a little bit different to the table, whether it's a data science approach to customer acquisition. It's more of just the pure operating experience that the investors have, having taken public self. And as I've gotten older, I like being a little more vulnerable. Like, I work with an executive coach. I like having this mentorship now more than ever. And the fact that I don't know everything, and I'm willing to accept that and to admit to it, so that I can up my game as a CEO as we go from, starting this 3 years ago to now to a growth stage company and to the public markets in the years to come.
Yeah, that's good. That's good feedback. It's sort of, and how have you, I guess, have you found with the COVID, more people are inclined to want to consider getting their estate in order? And you mentioned your demographic, but this is also ideal really for an aging demographic. Well, what kind of what's your demographic look like? Are you seeing it kind of go into some of the more elderly people and taking advantage of it too?
Yeah, so I'll talk about, kind of broadly speaking, our customers range from 18 to 92. I don't know what 18-year-olds are studying for real, but we have one. And
one's going to the bars right now and spreading COVID.
Yeah, they're out at the bars. Hey, I did my will at the bar last night. And then 92-year-olds said, hopefully they're tech enabled, but a lot of times you'll have a family member that's assisting them in the creation of it, because they're dealing with end of life care. It's really frustrating and emotional and a financial toll for a lot of families out there. That number will continue to grow over time. So the sweet spot's definitely two. It's the 30 to 55-year-old parents with minor children, just bought their first home, truly in the wealth building phase of their life. And then that second biggest cohort or demographic is 55 plus, and they're looking at it through one of three lenses. One is that half the demo of older Gen Xers and boomers don't have an estate plan, so they're setting it up for the first time. Two, they haven't updated their documents in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. A lot has changed. They may have lost a spouse, a parent. Their kids are now adults. They've downsized, moved states. The Secure Act had an impact on their estate planning needs, so they just want to be aware of what is most appropriate. So they come and update it. And then the third is the caregiver example. It's probably the most interesting one. And for COVID in particular, so, probably like mid-March, like basically as the country shut down through end of May, we saw an acceleration of growth that I don't know if we'll ever see that again in our company's history. We had to kind of reset expectations with investors. We're like, hey, this is like good for business, but at the same time, like, I don't think this is real. And I want to just make sure that we go back to appropriate growth curve moving forward. But what we just saw was hundreds of thousands of visitors to the site, thousands, tens of thousands of signups within a very short period of time. We had to dial back some of our creative campaigns, just being a little more sensitive to the times. People are really scared those first 2-3 months of COVID, especially high risk, elderly, people of color. So we hired in our customer success departments so that we could handle an increased volume in chats, extend our range from, at the time, 5 days to 6 days, now it's 7. And to not lose sight of our mission. Like, our mission is to help families prepare for a better future. And if we could support this incredible surge of growth in that short period of time, we knew that we could do it at scale as we continue to grow the company. So COVID for us led to 2 initiatives that we probably don't talk enough about. The first is our Healthcare Heroes initiative. We started getting people sending us articles from like CNN and Fox News and all these big news outlets that doctors and nurses and first responders were setting up their estate plans in droves. And the friction point that they were hitting is that attorneys weren't taking those meetings. They weren't meeting with people in person. They can only do so many over the phone or over Zoom. So they're getting pushed out 3, 6, 9 months. So people are starting to do holographic wills, write it on a piece of paper. They're doing these free online wills on sites you've never heard of. That is like not the approach to take. So we rolled out our Healthcare Heroes initiative. It was a free will-based estate plan offered to all U.S. healthcare professionals. Over 11,000 opted in. It's millions of dollars in revenue we could have captured, but we said no. My wife works in healthcare. My co-founder's wife does. A lot of family members of the team do, so it kind of hit close to home. And then the second piece, which was more recent, even though COVID, despite the number of cases, the deaths have gone down, is we did a teachers initiative, which is still live. Free will-based estate plan for teachers. As a lot of teachers were going back to school, they were scared that they would be in this environment for high risk of exposure. Kind of just sucks like that's the reality of where we're at as a country, without getting into the politics of it. So we wanted to do something noble as a response to COVID, and for our frontline heroes and for our teachers that are taking care of our kids, we felt like it was the right thing to do.
Well, that's extremely noble, and I think that's great paid-in capital. And give away a lot and expect nothing is always a good formula.
Yeah.
So Cody, I wanted to ask you, this is, I think, your third rodeo in terms of like successful ventures, and this is probably, really, really big one. If you could you talk about either whether it be wills and trusts, like, we're talking to entrepreneurs, people that want to be in your shoes or to educate them as much as possible. But are there some things that you just kind of look back, you woulda, coulda, should have done over better, or mistakes that you now in the position that you're at say, geez, that was like a no-brainer, should have just not done that? Because, I think from my vantage point, you learn just as much by the mistakes you make as, compared to the things that you do well. So could you maybe talk if there is anything out there that you think is like, shoot, I wish we just like avoided, this, debacle altogether in the beginning and it would have been better?
Yeah. The first, it's the single most important thing, regardless of what type of business you build, whether it's venture backed or not, getting a buttoned up set of incorporation documents and employment agreements and a structured cap table will save you what is most of the time a nightmare for a lot of companies and founders out there. The first year is always the hardest. It's so hard. You have financial stress, especially if you have family and kids. There's this complete unknown, and you might have pressure at home as much as pressure from your business partners. And the problem that so many companies run into is, three of us start a company, 33 and a third each, right? I walk away, you guys are left with 2/3 of the company. I have no obligation to you. I walk away with it. Now, vesting schedules are more talked about in the tech, the venture-backed side, but a vesting schedule puts everybody on the same set of expectations with a cliff involved. 1-year cliff is most common, 4-year vesting schedule. Now, if I walk away, I get nothing. That equity goes back to the company or to the option pool. or you guys, if you're the only two, could decide to grant, more equity yourselves and still have an appropriate sized option pool. So that's super important. The second, and this is more in the growth stage phase, is your corporate counsel as you take on more outside shareholders is not your counsel. And having personal counsel review your employment agreement with the company as you continue to scale, continue to grow, you want to protect yourself. The hope is that you continue to perform as a business, find profitability, find a path to an exit or the public markets, et cetera, and you don't get let go. But the reality is, if you are the CEO, you're always first to go. That's just how this works. Doesn't matter if you're a big company or small. And you don't want to be left with a 2-week paycheck if you have kids and a mortgage to pay. You want to be left with some severance. So just thinking through just the scenarios that can play out over time and how this could really impact you. So just more, hopefully it never happens, but it's nice. It's like having that second parachute if you go skydiving. And the third is just managing the cap table, managing your investors appropriately. The single best thing we've done with TrustMe, and I didn't do this as well with my last company. I didn't know, and I credit to Techstars for teaching me this and some stellar founders from the network. Sending out monthly updates to not just your existing investors, to your team, but even investors and partners that you're just talking to, especially in the first few years. It sets expectations so clearly, more than anything, because we all talk big vision as founders. This is the next billion-dollar idea. Is it shows your ability to execute. You take what you're saying, you back it up, you walk the walk and talk the talk. It's really hard to do that. And I think that update series, which we've done for 3 years now, every first day or first week of every month, I send out an update. It's huge. I think the list is like 600 people now, mostly VCs. It keeps people engaged so that when we're ready to fundraise again, they have expectations set. When we're ready to start a new partnership conversation, they're ready and set. And I like the fact that it's just a track record to reflect back on. So it's simple to do. It takes maybe an hour, 2 hours of time, once per month, but it's done wonders for us as a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world's littered with, to your point about the employment agreements, like, some famous names. We were talking about Steve Jobs earlier, being forced out of Apple, and I think he did quite well with the whole deal. But there's been a lot of technology-based companies that have had like the original vision or the founders that either get forced out or, I mean, when you're in business, everything starts off great, but sometimes there's infighting and issues, and not knowing how those mechanics are going to be played out, and like you said, to protect yourself is very, very valuable information. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. I was.
One of the biggest things that we see on our side of things is a beautiful will is created, wonderful trust is created, but then funding that. How are you helping individuals in through the internet make sure that these things get funded?
This is my actual trust. That was, for those that can't see the video version of this, I'm pulling out my set of trust documents.
Yeah.
This is the most frustrating part about estate planning as an industry today, is that 45 states require you to do printed documents. And then every institution that you have an account with, from your bank to your mortgage, et cetera, you have to go fill out a form. You have to fill it out in person, or you have to fill it out via DocuSign. It is not as easy as aggregating your accounts in like a mint.com or, one of these other personal money management apps. Now, from a regulatory perspective, we did the first electronic will in US history in the states of Nevada and Florida over the last 2 years. And we have 3 more states we'll go live in, hopefully by the end of the year here, but at least by Q1. We are making a push to go end-to-end digital in all 50 states. It's somewhat state specific. There's some uniform law that we've been a part of. We serve on a couple nonprofits to help drive this conversation, but like effectively we are lobbying and we're driving the conversation around e-wills and the inclusiveness of it. The reason why I say that is that instead of having to take this set of paper documents to your bank or UPS store, or you have a mobile notary come to your home, the experience that our customers can choose in Florida and Nevada now is they do a video call with our partners at Notarize. They're doing a digital signature. That notary does a digital notary stamp. That session is recorded as a video and stored in the cloud along with the documents. And anytime you need to make an update, that's the experience you go through. It's almost like more transparent than offline, than that like person I met at the bank or that person that came to my house. And if it's ever contested or brought up, you have records of it. So that's what we hope to bring to all 50 states in the years to come. Now, to answer more directly your question on trust funding, that is a 2021 goal of ours, that once this trust is created, we include a trust funding guide. We're already seeing a lot of the advisors that are working with our customers that are helping them with some of the form filling. I had to do this myself with my own trust with JPM. It was like a total pain in the ass, if I'm being honest. And the reality is that if you can get the biggest institutions to automate the form filling as simple as it is to log in your different accounts through Mint or your different credit cards through Credit Karma, why can't you retitle your assets as simply? It's like literally just, it goes from the Cody Barbo checking account to the Barbo Family Trust checking account. Like that's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
It's so silly.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's,
like it's almost worse than like a healthcare form experience where, you know, you see like how much money could be saved across the world if
yeah.
every medical facility had the same form. But yeah, so that's probably a longer runway for you to get that, you know, the banks and the financial institutions to agree. But now you're seeing things like DocuSign and
Oh yeah.
you know, coming, which are what I would think would augment a lot of your services.
Yeah, you have so DocuSign, 40 billion market cap company, has been a pioneer in the digital signature space. Adobe's making a ton of progress, and then Notarize, who's our notary partner out of Boston, has raised close to $100 million to help mostly the real estate industry get this process in motion. But we get to work with not just these specific institutions, but there's the Electronic Signatures and Records Association, which we're on the board of and lead their e-will committee. And then the second is the Uniform Law Commission, which we've been on their drafting committee for electronic wills for over 2 years. These organizations have representation of the GCs of the largest companies in the space, and we get to kind of ride that wave with them, despite them having a lot more resources. So our objective is to make it as seamless as a DocuSign experience for all customers, regardless of wealth, as they fund the trust post-creation.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, just made me think about this real quick. You know, in our worlds, like we never really think like, you know, the robo advisor is good for a lot of people because, you know, but people still like service and they still like, you know, expertise and customer service. But, you know, again, you're in an industry that you've disrupted and you know, sometimes when you hear like a lawyer will say, you know, these online things aren't me, obviously we know that's not the case, but how do you kind of, or maybe you don't even think about it in your radar screen, it's just not in your vision, but you know, is it a big lobby group that kind of like is constantly trying to get in your way? Because if you're taking market share from an industry that's been around for hundreds of years, I would assume that, you know, that occasionally you're going to run against some kind of roadblocks.
Yeah, so from a historical perspective, so LegalZoom kind of did the work for us. They were sued by everyone, every state bar association, every type of law firm imaginable. And we built a lot of our rollout of our documents on their case law. And the big thing too is we're not a law firm, right? LegalZoom's not a law firm. We're legal document generation companies. And the way that I was explaining this a little bit earlier with the attorney rollout is that we are contracting attorneys state by state to serve clients within that state. So these trust and estates attorneys, there's 160,000 across the country. And you'd think with 160,000 estate planning attorneys that more people would have an estate plan, the way that there's, I think, 300,000 advisors. They meet almost 35, 40 million Americans households, but that's still like an eighth of the population, right? That's pretty nominal.
Mm-hmm.
So for all these estate planning attorneys, they have to do everything that comes along with running a practice. They got to acquire customers. They got to manage the inbound, and they're not going to get everyone. They're price prohibitive. If you don't have a certain amount of assets, they're not a fit. And what the turnaround time is for the documents. You have people that start, that don't finish. They create the trust, but don't fund it. And then they have to pay all these licensing softwares for legacy software that generates the documents. That's what our technology does. So for us, there's similarities to the robos in that like we're trying to lead with best in class technology, but where we lean more into the traditional service layer of trust and estates attorneys is that people matter in this experience. It's such sensitive decisions that people are making and serious implications if it's not done correctly, that I really look at it as an opportunity to inject attorneys if needed, but more importantly, just lead with real people on our team. Our whole customer success team is based here in the United States, but majority in San Diego. So you're talking to Megan or Meg, Josh, Fabio, Aaron, Allison. They're the ones that are hand packaging your documents. They're the ones that are there for you with any questions. They all work under the leadership of our in-house trust and estates attorney, Patrick Hicks, who's been practicing for over a decade, from the everyday family to the highest net worth of families, almost billionaires. And we're here for people, with people behind our technology. And that's something we don't want to lose sight of, despite it's fun to make it, you know, kind of a tech-only approach.
Well, want to be sensitive to time. We're about bumping up against our allotted time here. I'd like to remind again our listeners we're nationally syndicated through iHeart, 13 cities, #1 entrepreneur broadcast in iHeart, Google, Stitch, SoundCloud, anywhere you can find the internet. We'd love for you to follow us and give us a like and pass this along. Cody, thank you so much on behalf of both of us for coming on the show today. For our listeners, what would be the best way to get a hold of you or learn more about Wills and Trust?
Yeah, so me personally, I'm very active on social, so LinkedIn and Twitter. So just Cody Barbo on both, easy to find me. And for TrustMe, it's trustme.com. It's pretty much as easy as it gets. I'm still blown away that we got that domain. So we're happy to take care of you there. Hop on our live chat, and our team would love to help your listeners.
Great. Thanks again for all your information, and wish you continued success.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond.